Supercharged, a podcast focusing on renewable energy and the passion behind the movement. Supercharged is a thoughtful journey through renewable energy sustainability and an integrated lifestyle. Subscribe and listen each week as we chat with thought leaders, influencers, and those who simply choose to live a better way. And hopefully, along the way, you too will be inspired to live supercharged. And I have a special guest with me today, Chris Godsall. Chris, thanks for joining us on Supercharged.
My pleasure, Kevin. Great to be here.
So you and I were talking off camera, and actually we were having another conversation. And I thought, wow, this story has to be told. You know, this whole story, and I will let you tell it because it is your story. But the whole idea behind this podcast is really just to talk to people that really have thought through, you know, in a very deep way, the why behind sustainability, and in a balanced way. And, you know, it's not the fringe ideas that discount everyone else in the process. But I'm really curious, your background. I mean, first of all, let's lay the foundation with your business background, especially related to this idea that I didn't even believe when I heard it first.
Well, I'm happy to. In the 1990s, I started out in a kind of a sustainability and health business, serving food to seniors and people with a loss of autonomy, driven by young people. So I was in my 20s. That organization is 25 years old and has become a model for how to kind of community sustainability, and it has a number of corporate partners that are involved who've helped us, you know, pay for the kitchen or the vehicles, you know, for example. But it really solves a major problem in urban communities, in Montreal in particular, where too many people are living alone with a loss of autonomy, and too many young people are looking for opportunities to be involved in a community, gain work experience. We put the two together, and it's a very much a sustainable solution.
So you make your own food? I mean, I thought it was like a restaurant delivery type thing, but it's actually you're actually producing the food as well. It's like almost like a Meals on Wheels type thing.
It is like Meals on Wheels. It is Meals on Wheels, run by young people. But today the organization owns a farm. It grows 30% of its fruits and vegetables on the rooftops. Wow. It owns a whole building, an intergenerational building where Thanksgiving and Christmas and major events bring the community together with people that live with a loss of autonomy, people that are alone, often, you know, but they're still independent enough to live alone, but often with a loss of autonomy. So it's that, and then it's all run by people between the ages of about 17 and 25 is the main group. When we celebrated it's 25 years old now, we didn't celebrate that because of COVID, but when the organization celebrated the 20th anniversary, there were thousands of people that showed up to that event. So it's thousands of people have been through the program of joining that group and contributing to it. And so it really had it's definitely a sustainable organization. And, you know, that was something that I started with one of my best friends, Keith Fitzpatrick, and I ran that organization for 3 years. When I left, I went into an industry that I was very interested in, the forest sector. And in part, I think I was attracted to that sector because, especially at the time around 1999, the industry was really facing a crisis, almost an existential crisis around sustainability. Can we cut trees down in a sustainable way? And have we over-mechanized the production of lumber to the point where the environmental consequences are now reaching a critical point? And I got into that industry, you know, and decided that I was going to try to solve a part of that problem, a little tiny part of that problem, by building a company that would specialize in recovering trees that were dead but useful. And the source of those dead trees, non-living trees, was in hydro dam reservoirs. So in the 20th century, starting probably around the 1920s, right up until about 1985, you had a huge kind of global boom of hydro dam production in almost every developed country in the world, and also in North America. And in every one of the cases where there were trees in the valley that was flooded, you ended up with an underwater forest. And that forest underwater in fresh water was perfectly preserved. If you cut the tree and you can get it out of the water and bring it to a sawmill and you cut it, if trees that were underwater for 100 years would produce perfect lumber. This is a perfect replacement for living trees in every sense, aesthetically, structurally. This is just these trees are in cold storage.
So after you take the outside, I guess the bark off, or you take the outside ring off, you're saying the tree inside would look just like a tree you had cut previously, or one that was like a dead stand or whatever. That
exactly
what would it look like?
It's exactly as if you cut a living tree.
Wow.
In fact, there are log buyers around the world, especially in Japan, that buy logs from living trees and sink them intentionally underwater for decades. They've known that for years, that fresh water is a perfect natural preservative for timber and for lumber. Now, wet wood that is combined with oxygen will rot the wood. So long as the wood is completely submerged under fresh water, it stays preserved for hundreds and hundreds of years. And in our case, we started to target hydro dam reservoirs in Canada using, it took us 3 years to build the technology on a company called Triton Resources that I started in 2000.
And you can't pay enough divers with chainsaws.
That's an inefficient way to cut trees underwater, and it has a whole bunch of risks. There are only a handful of people in the world that can do that safely. It's much better to use machines to cut trees underwater.
Right.
And we set out to build the robotic technologies, the industrial robotic technologies that could do this underwater. And we built a remotely operated vehicle that was, tethered to a barge that a remote operator could use to cut trees underwater by attaching an airbag to the tree. The biggest challenge of cutting trees underwater is that they're negatively buoyant; they'll sink. So you can cut a tree underwater, but getting into the surface is a huge challenge.
Yeah. So
we spent a few years developing that technology and another technology. So that's called the Sawfish, another technology called the Shark, which was designed to be able to operate on a barge that has no anchor and that can be driven. And it has about a 90-foot arm that reaches down, cuts the tree, and pulls it to the surface. And we built and perfected those technologies over a matter of a few years. We started harvesting timber in Canada, went overseas to Malaysia, Panama, cut trees underwater in Washington State, and in Ghana, where I'm a co-owner of an underwater logging business in Ghana with 3 partners that I've been working with. 2 of whom are Canadian, one of whom is half Canadian, half Canadian, and we run an underwater logging business there with a sawmill that cuts trees that have been underwater since 1964. So African teak that's coming out of the water in Ghana that's been underwater since 1964.
That's got to be, the price has got to be much higher than fresh cut, I would think. I mean, there's got to be a unique quality to it.
Well, the unique quality to it often is that the trees that we're cutting were standing in 1964. And since that time, all the trees around that reservoir have been cut. So there's a shortage of high quality logs. There's a shortage of old growth logs. So often the quality difference is that you're getting an old growth log that is better than what's available in the marketplace. And then on top of that, our customers absolutely love it. Sort of eliminates that ambiguity. Like, I love this product, but I'm worried about where it came from. I mean, that's a classic sustainability issue. And we know that certainly in forestry, the certification systems that allow a certified product to be presented to the marketplace is this wood came from this source and it was harvested sustainably. That chain of custody and that forest management certification is very, very important, development over the last 20 years. But when you talk about an emotional connection to a product, when somebody says, this boardroom table or or our dining room table comes from wood that was
the Hoover Dam.
It came out of the dam. It was flooded and considered to be waste. And then somebody recovered it using technology and made it, and here it is. And we know that there's a tree standing somewhere that there's only so many trees that get cut down based on supply and demand. Somewhere there's a tree standing.
Had to be cut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that emotional connection to a product around sustainability, we think is, that's a really important part of the sustainability story, I think. And then it goes deeper too, because my experience working in the forest products industry is that a lot of people love wood for different reasons. But nobody wants to be associated with some unethical harvesting practice.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Right.
you can sort of think of a family sitting around that table that's been harvested from a tree that was underwater since 1964. Maybe there's a family of 10 people sitting around there. There might be 3 or 4 people sitting around there that are truly passionately interested in sustainability, and they don't want anything to do with a product that was cutting down the last of the rainforests. There are 6 other people sitting around that table, and maybe 2 of them are just interested in innovation. It's like, I want the world. I want to be a part of innovation. I want to see good ideas come to fruition, because that's what I believe in. And then, then there might be another, I think I'm up to 6 people or 8 people, but the rest of the people at the table fit into a category. Yeah, it's a big table, but this is a very normal thing. There's nothing wrong with it. People don't really think through the issues sometimes, but they don't want to be a part of they don't want to be in the wrong side of the issue.
Right.
And this is interesting. Like, there just aren't that many cheerleaders for bad practices.
Yeah.
There aren't many people saying, I can't wait to cut down the last of the rainforests, or I'm a fan of climate change. What we actually hear, which is very noisy in the media, is this battle around sustainability. And it makes it sound like there are millions and millions of people that are advocates for bad environmental practices. And that's the political noise.
Right.
But most people don't think that way, right? Once you personalize the relationship with sustainability at some level, and the word sustainability kind of makes it feel like it's a political issue sometimes. But
sadly, it has become that. Yeah,
it has been.
Yeah.
But if you unpack what sustainability is about, it's actually about our communities. It's about the safety of our future for our kids. It's about balancing our need for what we need today with what we need for tomorrow. It is actually the human story. The human story of building a future that is uncompromised by our actions today. That's just the articulation of what human beings have been doing forever. And so this next step in the journey of sustainability, whether it's cutting trees underwater using robotic technologies and recovering trees, or whether it's finding better ways to connect corporate performance with the values of average people, it's the same concept, which is we're finding ways to improve the economy while also creating sustainability of the communities and the environments that we depend on to live. These ideas are fundamental, and I sometimes they're made to be a little too complicated.
Yes, and I'm just the way that you kind of wrapped up and that up and said, it at the end of the day, it really is the human story. I love the way that you let's just really get pragmatic here, and let's just define it at its base term. But I've got 2 quick questions that I want to ask you about that we kind of glossed over and kind of flew by. And I was listening, but I made a mental note, circle back to these. But the first one is, you were very laissez-faire about this idea. Well, yeah, I was in this, and then I decided I'd go into forestry, and then I would decide that we're going to cut trees under dams. And I'm thinking, there is so much that you left out of that story that says, how in the world did you come up with that idea? That's my first question. What's the story behind that? And the second one is kind of compare like the cost factor of normal, lumberjack cutting trees out there and dragging them out on semi trucks versus having to go 200 feet down in a reservoir and cut a tree and bring it up. So the first one's like the whole idea around the idea.
Well, the idea comes from, first of all, getting involved in something you're interested in. So I was interested in the forestry sector. So I actually moved to British Columbia from Quebec, and I got involved in the industry, and I started to work in the industry. And working in that industry created this kind of pathway to the things that I was interested in. Ultimately, I worked in that industry long enough that I felt that I understood it well enough to be able to take an idea to the marketplace. And I was really lucky being in British Columbia, where we had the best forestry technology and incredible marine technology all in my backyard. So as I started to think about putting teams together to solve this specific problem of cutting trees underwater, because I'm not a robotic engineer, but I could access teams that could help to come to the table. That was really, those are sort of the ingredients for the idea.
I mean, was anybody doing this already?
There were companies that were doing it, with divers, or they were doing it in ways that in really shallow water. But we were saying, let's do this at an industrial scale,
right?
And let's do it in deep water, because most of the trees are in deep water. So we're really the first company to apply technology to the problem, and then to be able to create the kind of capacity that's required to turn it into a real business, a global business. And so when we did that, we also looked at some of the advantages when you think about cutting trees. So I agree with you that there's a huge barrier. One of the things that we loved is that if we could tackle the barrier to entry into the business, we could open up some cost advantages. So once we cut a tree underwater in 100 feet of water and brought it to the surface, we're actually on a water surface. So transporting that log using barges, or we put them into these underwater bunks and we tow them to our sawmill. The cost of transporting the log from the place where you cut it to the sawmill is pennies for us per cubic meter. If you run a land-based operation, you have to build a road and you have to manage that land-based environment. Those roads often get washed away in the rainy season in tropical countries. So road building becomes 20-30% of your cost. It's about 0.1% of our cost. Secondly, when we're managing that underwater environment, where there are underwater trees, we have no pests, we have no fires. We're actually working with the community to improve that environment, because those trees cause boating accidents. So we clear channels and provide data that you can use off your phone as you're transporting your boat or your barge through that channel. We can actually make the region safer. We work with communities around how to improve the area for their own purposes. And so our costs around managing that land without any fires, no pests, no road building is virtually nothing. And the net effect of what we do is that the community is better off having had the trees removed. Whereas there are very few communities where land-based logging at scale happens where there isn't some kind of cost, right? And the cost can get very severe. In Philippines, for example, they've had mudslides and had to shut land-based logging down for a long period.
Right.
So to answer your second question as briefly as possible, sometimes when you tackle the biggest barrier to entry, in our case, technology, you open up new cost advantages. And so we've been able to be competitive we have a little higher cost in the harvesting, but we have lower costs in the wood transportation and the land management piece.
But I could see, I mean, you touched on, there's a story behind this, I can tell you where it came from. I can send you the photograph. I can show you the barge that was dragging this tree down the channel, to it being cut. And I would also think that there's got to be some, shift in just the biology of the tree, this has been underwater for 25 years or 50 years or whatever it is, that says, maybe it's less susceptible to insect. Maybe it's less susceptible to decay, or, there's got to be something that happens in those 50 years. It's not just it's not like for like, so to speak. So is there any minor advantages to this wood?
There are advantages. But just from a technical perspective, wood scientists would say, okay, what are the properties of the wood? And as you test the wood properties, they are the same as the wood properties for a living tree. But anybody that knows and loves wood knows that wood is a highly dynamic material. The longer it's left in the sun, the longer it's left to air dry under certain conditions, it changes moisture content, it changes porosity, it changes the resonance of the wood. So if you're interested in wood that performs, for example, as a musical instrument, we sell our wood to a very famous musical instrument company that not only buys the wood because they love the story behind it, they believe that it resonates better. So they're buying the same species. They wouldn't change species. They're not going to do that.
Right.
buying the same thing, but they believe that it has a better resonance to it. And I don't know why that is. I sometimes, and I can't tell the difference. But I think that also people do have this emotional connection to the wood, so they experience it in a different way. Not so much that a musical instrument expert would say that it's resonating better. They believe it does. In the end of the day, you start with a baseline that it's the same, and then there are some properties that that make it maybe a little bit better. It's easier to cut in a sawmill. It's got enough moisture in it that the saw stays cooler. It's obviously comes from, you know, very high quality wood. So you're starting with a baseline of quality, and then you add that kind of emotional connection to it. But wood is such an interesting and dynamic product that it really depends. You know, some of the smaller wood artisans that have bought our wood swear that it carves better, swear that furniture makers swear that it's better. But I can't put that on, you can't put that on the side of a package because you need some proof.
It's hard to quantify that, but I mean, it really is and as we wrap up today, it really is just a great story behind the idea of how you are harvesting this wood. And the story is not like one dimensional. It doesn't stop with you. I mean, it can go to the furniture manufacturer or the musician or the musical instrument manufacturer, or, you know, the carver can say, you know, the wood that we source is truly sustainable, and here's why. Here's the story behind it. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here with Supercharged, is just tell stories like this that really shine a light on companies that care and companies that are doing a great job, and ideas that really do work, and they do meet this triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line that we're trying to achieve. And Chris, I just really appreciate you just sharing this story behind the company. As we close today, tell us the name of the company, and if people wanted to like try to source wood from, you know, underwater harvesting, let us know where to find that.
Yeah, you can look up, the company's called Dedeso, Dedeso, and you can find us online. That's all out of Ghana, all majority Ghanaian owned, a proudly Ghanaian company that we've helped to build there. The global company is owned, as I say, now owned by Voltalia, a French energy company, and they have operations in South America. But if you're looking to actually source the wood, we'd be happy to help out. Well,
Chris, I really appreciate you just sharing your story today, and really just kind of unpacking the why behind the idea of this great this passion project that turned into something very sustainable. So as we close today, do you have just a parting word for us that really just tell people how you navigate this whole idea, the space between doing good and good business, kind of tie those two together?
Well, if you start with a big market, a big problem, you know, the forest sector is 1% of global GDP. Almost everybody in their daily life, if you stop and look around, you're surrounded by wood. If you see an opportunity like that where you say, wow, this is a big issue, find a lane to work in, find your customers that care, deliver great products. Never expect somebody to pay more for a product that is less valuable from a functionality perspective just because of a great story. Focus on creating great product experiences where the value add is that emotional connection to the product. And I actually think once you have traction in that space, great product that's well priced, maybe there is a premium, but well priced, and that you can create that emotional connection with people, you'll find that table gets bigger and bigger, and that there are more people sitting at that table that are interested in buying that product. And I think the future of sustainability as a driver for business is absolutely incredibly bright. And I'm more than optimistic about the future of sustainability as a driver in business. And thrilled that we had a chance here on Supercharged to talk a bit about our story. It's just one of so many stories that are out there that are not only inspired. I mean, we're fortunate that people have said our story has been, it's an interesting thing for them to learn about. There are just so many great stories out there to be told, and the sustainability is really becoming the mainstream.
Well, what a great way to wrap us up. I mean, you started us off by telling us that, you know, sustainability is kind of defined as really just the human story, but then to wrap us up and say, you know, a nice wood metaphor, just build a bigger table. What a way to leave us supercharged. Chris, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin.